Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of Mega Projects. This one, another heavily requested one, the Hindenburg. Everyone loves an airship, or a Zeppelin, or whatever you want to call it, and this is probably the most famous of them, so we're going to look at the Hindenburg, we're going to look at some other related airships as well in this video, and let's jump into it. It was a chaotic, fiery demise. The death of the mighty Hindenburg on the 6th of May 1937 in New Jersey sent shockwaves around the world. It was of course captured on film and in numerous photographs which you've undoubtedly seen, creating one of the most well-documented transportation disasters that the world had ever seen. The video footage of the Hindenburg bursting into flames and crashing down to earth, killing 36 people, remains shocking even to this day and proved to be absolutely devastating for the airship industry. The aircraft surged ahead in the race for the skies, but 83 years later, the airship is making a comeback. While the name Hindenburg has become synonymous with tragedy, maybe the time has come to look at Zeppelins in a new light. Forward-thinking, technically brilliant, and the epitome of luxury. The first rigid airship arrived in 1900, the brainchild of Ferdinand von Zeppelin, a German inventor whose name, of course, would forever be linked with the airship. Their popularity quickly grew, but during World War I, their use went from commercial to military. The German Zeppelins, of which 95 had been built, were used for bombing raids over European cities, beginning with Antwerp on the 2nd and 3rd of September 1914. Attacks on British soil commenced in 1915, but these were slow-moving, bulky ships that were not the ideal attack method. The downing of a Zeppelin over Britain in 1916 led to their use being slowly diminished. Anyone else here play Red Alert 2? The Zeppelins, they were the weapon of choice. After the war, the Zeppelin Company continued construction, despite several being confiscated as war reparations. Slowly, the British, French, and the Americans got in on the act, and by the late 1920s and early 1930s, the popularity of the airship was booming. However, these early airships suffered a high crash ratio, and many died aboard these flying blimps. In October 1930, the British R-101 crashed in bad weather in northern France, killing 48, while the US ships USS Shenandoah, Akron, and Macon all crashed with a loss of life. The Zeppelin Company, on the other hand, had a faultless safety record. Despite the rather obvious safety issues, the airships remained hugely popular, and there was never one as large as what appeared out of Germany in the early 1930s. The name Hindenburg came a little later. This airship began life as the less creative LZ-129. Measuring 237 meters long, it was only slightly smaller than the Titanic, while its 140,000 cubic meters of hydrogen would eclipse everything that had come before it. If you'd like an interesting comparison here, that's 4 times the cubic space of the Capitol Rotunda in Washington, D.C. It was powered by 4 Daimler-Benz DB602 LOF6 V16 diesel engines, each capable of producing 1,200 horsepower. LZ-129 was built with a duralumin structure, which was an early form of aluminium, and would have 15 Ferris wheel-like ring bulkheads along its length, which were secured together with longitudinal girders and 16 cotton gas bags fitted between them. The outer skin was a mixture of cotton and reflective materials, which included specks of aluminium designed to protect the gas bags from light radiation. Ultraviolet rays were able to damage the bags, while infrared could cause them to overheat. The gas cells, created by Goodyear and located within the gas bags, were entirely new and used multiple layers of gelatinized latex instead of gold beater skins like previous airships. The upper deck housed both passenger cabins and large public rooms. Passengers were generally expected to spend the majority of their time in the public spaces rather than in their cramped cabins. These areas were composed of a dining room on the left of the ship and a lounge and writing room on the right-hand side. The view from the airships was always a popular selling point, and both sides of the ship came with long slanted windows where passengers could gaze out to their heart's content. On the lower deck, there were washrooms, a mess hall for the crew, and a smoking lounge. Obviously, the smoking lounge was incredibly carefully controlled, as the entire ship was basically just one big, floating, incredibly flammable balloon. It was located in a pressurized area that could only be accessed through a swiveling airlock door in the bar. Now, helium was initially selected instead of hydrogen to fill the giant balloon, as of course it's non-flammable. However, at the time, helium was incredibly rare and could only be sourced from a few oil fields in the United States. In 1927, the US placed a ban on the export of helium, and despite the Zeppelin company believing that the ruling would eventually be overturned, it was not to be, as you probably know. On March 4, 1936, 5 years after the construction began, LZ-129 made her maiden voyage with 87 passengers and crew on board. This was very much a test flight, and all the passengers were connected with the Zeppelin company in some way. The following day, during a radio interview with the Zeppelin company's chairman, Dr. Hugo Echner, he was asked what they had named the floating ship, and his response was Hindenburg, after the president of Germany at the time. On the 23rd of March, the ship carried 80 reporters from Friedrichshafen to Lowenthal with the name Hindenburg in 1.8-meter text now clearly visible along its side. 6 flights were completed over the next 3 weeks before the Hindenburg was deemed ready to take its public bow. This involved a 6,600-kilometer propaganda flight around Germany known as the Die Deutschlandfahrt between the 26th and the 29th of March. A few days later, the Hindenburg officially became an international ship as she departed for her first commercial passenger flight, a 4-day transatlantic voyage to Rio de Janeiro. This was the first trip across the Atlantic by any airship. Now, if you're looking at these dates and you're wondering how this all fits into the rise of the Third Reich, well, let's take a look at that, shall we? On March 7, 1936, German forces occupied the Rhineland, a demilitarized zone bordering France, which had been established during the 1919 Treaty of Versailles. While the Nazis had certainly seized power, their control wasn't absolute just yet. Hitler sanctioned a referendum to promote the German people's support for the Rhineland issue, but also to approve a single-party list, which would effectively mean the Nazi Party would be the sole representatives in the Reichstag, the German parliamentary building located in Berlin. The Hindenburg and her sister ship, the Graf Zeppelin, were seen as vital in stirring up the nationalistic views that Hitler needed for this support. The 2 giant Zeppelins spent 4 days sailing across Germany, dropping propaganda leaflets and blaring the kind of slogans and music you'd expect to hear at a Hitler Youth disco. Quite astonishingly, and I say that with the best and most sarcastic British tone that I can muster, 98.79% of the vote came back in support of the Nazis, and sadly, we all know what came next. In her first and only full season in service, the Hindenburg clocked up 17 round trips across the Atlantic in 1936, 10 to the United States and 7 to Brazil. But there was no other foreign airfield she visited as frequently as she did Lakehurst, located in Manchester Township, New Jersey. The 10 westward trips to Lakehurst took between 53 and 78 hours, while eastward voyages lasted between 43 and 61 hours. In May 1936, the Hindenburg made a surprise visit to England, and something quite bizarre happens that's never really been fully explained. On a return trip from the United States, the Hindenburg flew over the small town in West Yorkshire called Kiley. No doubt seeing such a vast structure appearing over the village was strange enough, but as eyes gazed upwards, they noticed something fall from the Hindenburg. 2 boys, Alfred Butler and Jack Gerard, raced through the high street and found a bouquet of carnations, a small silver cross, and a letter dated the 22nd of May 1936. The letter read, "To the finder of this letter, please deposit these flowers and cross on the grave of my dear brother, Lieutenant Franz Schult, 1st Guard Regiment, zu Fuss, POW in Skipton Cemetery in Kiley near Leeds. Many thanks for your kindness, John P. Schult, the 1st Flying Priest." While historians have speculated that the visit may have been designed to allow a close-up view of the industrial heartland of northern England, the story certainly fits. John P. Schult was a German priest whose brother had died of influenza in 1919 at the Ravenswood POW camp in Skipton, close to where the Hindenburg passed over. The story goes that the 2 young boys did indeed take the carnations and the cross and found the grave of Schultz's brother. It's one of those stories we can be skeptical of and just believe that it was a German ruse to get a glimpse of the Yorkshire industries, or we can believe it's just a heartwarming story of brotherly love and, well, I'll just let you decide. In July 1936, the Hindenburg broke the transatlantic round-trip record between Frankfurt and Lakehurst, completing the full trip in 98 hours and 28 minutes. That's 52 hours and 49 minutes westbound and 45 hours and 39 minutes eastbound. As the 1936 season was coming to a close, the airship had flown 308,323 kilometers and carried 2,798 passengers, as well as 160 tons of freight and mail. The Hindenburg, well, it had proven a huge success. In terms of price, though, a one-way ticket between Germany and the United States was around $400. Doesn't sound too bad until you realize that's about $7,370 in today's money. This was certainly no small amount in those days, which meant that the Hindenburg's clientele was almost exclusively really wealthy. On the 1st of August, she again found herself paraded as a Nazi stooge, this time during the opening ceremony of the 1936 Summer Olympic Games, at which she crossed over the Olympic Stadium in Berlin with an enormous Olympic flag trailing below her. On the 14th of September, she made an appearance at what would become one of the most infamous Nazi events, the Nuremberg Rally. It's fair to say that the future of the Hindenburg and its owners, the Zeppelin Company, looked pretty rosy as 1937 began. After completing her first flight to South America, she left Frankfurt for Lakehurst on the evening of the 3rd of May, and 3 days later, she was nearing her destination. A thunderstorm barreled through the area and delayed her final approach into New Jersey. While she waited, she treated her passengers, and no doubt plenty on the grounds, to a brief tour of the Manhattan skyline. At 7 p.m., the Hindenburg was cleared for its final approach into Lakehurst. Her approach to the mooring mast was not a smooth one. Captain Pruss ordered several sharp turns as the Hindenburg approached her final destination. One was thought to be because the ground crew were not ready, but the final two were probably because of a shift in wind direction. At 7:21 p.m., 2 landing lines dropped from the ship and were taken hold of by the ground crew. Just 4 minutes later, at 7:25 p.m., a fire erupted inside the Hindenburg and it quickly burst into flames. In less than a minute, the entire structure crashed to the ground. A huge ball of fire expanded but quickly contracted as the structure caved in on itself. A total of 13 passengers and 22 crew died. Watching the end of the mighty Zeppelin, it seems miraculous that 62 people made it out alive. There has been much speculation over what happened on the night of March 6, 1937, but there has never been any definitive explanation. There are, however, plenty of theories, and we could probably do an entire hour on those theories, so we're just gonna stick to 2 of them: static spark and hydrogen leak. Probably the most widely accepted theory was that a spark somewhere on the Hindenburg led to it catching fire. Some have suggested that this could have been caused by an electric spark due to the buildup of static electricity on the airship, possibly as a result of the landing lines that were dropped shortly before the crash. As I mentioned earlier, there had been a large storm in the area, and this could have provided an electrical charge in the atmosphere. While most modern analysis tends to focus on an electrical spark of some kind, there is still debate as to whether it was the hydrogen or the fabric that ignited. It's easy to assume it was the hydrogen because of the nature of the gas, but others have argued that the skin, which had been coated with specks of aluminium, may have contributed directly to the fire. Sabotage. Was it Hitler? Was it done to embarrass the Nazis? Was it the suspicious acrobat with the dog on board? Humans, we love a bit of a conspiracy, and even more, we love one when it can be directed towards other humans. The list of potential suspects and motives has been steadily growing for years, and to be honest, most of them are just hogwash. Most of the sabotage theories seem to stem from the unwavering belief that the Hindenburg was entirely safe, but to quote Forrest Gump, well, shit happens. Fingers have been pointed at a rigger on the ship named Erich Spell, who died in the accident, and acrobat on board, Joseph Spar, who was traveling with his dog in the hold compartment and made a suspiciously high number of visits to said dog during the trip. Adolf himself has also been blamed as a retaliation for the original captain's reluctance to take part in his propaganda trips and apparent refusal to name the ship the Hitler. There has never been any substantial proof of any of these, and much evidence can be described as clutching at straws at best. Understandably, the public confidence in the mighty airships was shattered after such horrific images emerged. The Hindenburg sister ship, the Graf Zeppelin II, was completed in 1938, but never once carried paying passengers. But as harrowing as the incident with the Hindenburg had been, it remains only the third worst airship tragedy in history. So we might be thinking, well, surely these will never return. Well, not only will they return, but their sizable bulk is already appearing on the horizon. The British, Americans, French, and Chinese are all nearing completion of various types of airship. There's no other way to look at it. Zeppelins are coming back, faster and safer than ever before, while being vastly more environmentally friendly than a belching passenger airliner. It's a very real possibility that within 10 years we'll be seeing quite a few of these great floating balloons. And it will signify a remarkable turnaround of the airship. And why not? We still use cruise liners, even after the Titanic, and passenger airliners after, well, I mean, just take your pick. For some reason, the fiery blaze that brought down the Hindenburg has been etched into our minds, and it remains there even 83 years later. The irony that we're returning to it proves just how astonishing and forward-thinking the mighty Hindenburg once was. There's no question about it. The largest airliners are falling out of fashion, but airships might just be roaring back. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, smash the like button below. As I always say, if you've got suggestions for this channel, most of these videos are your suggestions, so use the comments below. If you thumbs up the ones you like, they will rise to the top and I'm more likely to see them and therefore make them, so that's a great way to do it. And as always, thank you for watching.